next speaker is Tristan. He's from Campus Founders and the Technical University of Munich. He is a founder, AI expert, and lecturer with experience in developing strategies, partnerships, and solutions around AI for startups, global enterprises, and the public sector. He currently serves as the AI lead at AI Founders, which is part of Campus Founders, one of the largest AI startup incubators in Europe. He is a lecturer for AI for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at the Technical University of Munich and a lecturer for AI for Business at the Munich Business School. And he also works as a senior AI strategist at Applied AI and advises investors such as venture capitals and private equities on the topic of AI. Tristan, we are very happy to have you here with your talk about startups and AI, unleashing new possibilities for business growth and innovation. The stage is yours.
Thank you. Is it working? Yes, perfect. So, I mean, the people who know me know that I really like often to approach topics from a historical standpoint, because I really believe in Mark Twain when he said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And I think there are a lot of things that we actually can learn from history. And something that comes up quite often if we talk about artificial intelligence is that we're talking about AI being the new electricity. But if we look at kind of like the implementation of electricity, I think it's so interesting to see that it took 50 years from the beginning of the electricity to really see an impact on our GDP. And the question is a little bit, why is this? Because when electricity arrived in the factories, not much happened. Because if you look at kind of like how factories worked before, you see you had like the single line shaft and there was a motor driving kind of like being the single power source. And electricity just changed the power source. So there was not really much of an effect. And it took almost these kind of like 30, 40 years for people to realize and catch up what they can now do with this technology and realize, okay, well, now with electricity, we actually have the possibility to build kind of like these small engines into the tables and now be much more effective. And also this allowed for people to rearrange the factory in a way that it allowed for a smooth production. And at the end of the day, this made possible the what we call now assembly line, or that we know as assembly line. So take this in mind that often it requires a bit of time for a technology really to catch up, and especially for organizations and companies, it takes a lot of time to really catch up with this technology. And for my talk today, I have 3 objectives. So the first one is I want to show you why I think it's so challenging for many organizations to actually apply artificial intelligence. The second objective I have today is I want to tell you why I believe that startups actually have a strategic advantage when it comes to applying artificial intelligence. And the third point I want to take away is why I think it's so important for organizations, if they want to do artificial intelligence, to actually work together with AI startups. So why is it so challenging of applying artificial intelligence? And I think you kind of like get a little bit the point now with ChatGPT that everything is happening much faster and technology seems to be progressing at an exponential state, whereas organizations take quite a long time really to adapt and they move much, much slower, actually at a logarithmic scale. And we kind of like see this widening gap, right? So what is happening? I mean, we see kind of like how everything moves as an exponential pace. This is mainly driven by an observation made a couple of years ago by Moore that we call Moore's law. And what is very interesting, we believe often things are moving exponentially when in fact it's not one technology, but often we see kind of like these double S curves. So we have an old technology and a new technology. So if you look at Moore's law, that says kind of like the amount of transistors actually was at the beginning was shrinking every 2 years, and by this the computational power is doubling. It actually didn't work this way, but we needed a lot of different technological advancements. So first electromechanical, and we have different kind of like technological states or advances that allowed us for the technology to progress in this exponential state. And I think very similar things we see when we look at the world of artificial intelligence, that the technology is now kind of like moving also at a seeming exponential rate. And this creates kind of like this bad news this gulf of expectation when we try to apply artificial intelligence, where we on the one hand side see all the time kind of like what we read in the research, the cutting edge things, and then we have kind of like what actually can be applied in organizations. And we see it again and again, especially now with ChatGPT, where the technology becomes very, very hyped and overhyped, and suddenly the people are getting disappointed because it's not often working like this when you try to apply it. And I mean, this was the picture that we had a couple of years ago and still have it, that most of the organizations or a lot of the organizations that are starting and want to apply artificial intelligence actually fail or get very little return on their investments. So what is that what we can do, right? So in order to cope with the technological change, organizations are moving very slow. Most of the organizations are trying kind of like to become more agile. We see a lot of spin-offs, so especially in the government sector. We see now, for example, things like the GovTech campus that get churned out because they realize it's often so difficult with existing administration to push forward new innovation. And we see this all over again, right? So here we have to see, okay, to figure out what we can we do to keep an organization much more agile, especially now that we have all the time a wave of new technology, and we really have to start to adapt. Because what happens if we don't adapt, and here again we can look at history, this is a phenomenon we call in economics creative destruction, right? So we're moving, we're advancing at some point, right? We're becoming better, and we're able to adapt to a certain point. And then a new technology comes, and when we fail to reinvent, what will happen is kind of creative destruction. And we see the story all over again. I think the latest that we have seen, I think it's a very nice example, is actually the example of Meta, or Facebook, right? So when they started with their environment, they were the fastest growing application, and then at some point came TikTok, and now who is still using Facebook? I mean, not my generation anymore. But people are coming more and more on TikTok. So what did Facebook try to do? Actually, they tried to launch a new app, kind of like what they called Meta, and this also failed. It didn't get adopted. So what happened then is now they re-challenging all the energy back to AI, because AI really is now the trend, and everyone wants to avoid that this is happening to them, right? So no one wants to be the blockbuster on the street. Everyone wants to be the Netflix. So what we see again is that really that companies now have to do something when they want to adopt this new technology, when they want to go for artificial intelligence. A lot of companies are struggling. It's not easy. It's difficult to do. And they're trying to become more adaptive. They're trying to become more agile. And we see kind of like more of these spin-offs created from companies. So this is where it comes in, where startups often have this strategic advantage when it comes to applying artificial intelligence. So here to sum up, the challenge of applying AI is basically because AI progresses very, very fast, and companies often have challenges to keep track, to implement this in their operations. So why do startups then have the strategic advantage? And what I call is kind of like this big innovative point of what AI actually allows us to do is basically the idea of zero operational cost. So when we're thinking about artificial intelligence, we often think about these new products and product offerings that we're bringing. But actually, I think the real invention is how AI allows us to completely change our operational model, to really have now going towards change our core processes and going really towards zero operational cost. And let's think about it, right? So we have a lot of startups that do something that has existed for many, many years, such, for example, Uber or Airbnb. So the business of selling drives from A to B, or selling housing, selling housing is nothing new, but very old. The big difference here is in the operational model and how artificial intelligence is actually used to streamline operations, right? No one would think of Uber as being a main AI company, but they use AI in almost all their processes to have to serve much more customers faster and easier. And I think this is the big thing. And I think this is also the opportunity now for startups, especially if they're created new, because they have very good overview over their processes. The only reason for that is they have so little. And the reason why startups have so little processes comes from our ancient kind of like social brain theory, right? So we have just a number of connections that we actually can have, that we can manage because we know the people, and to them it's still easy to communicate with them. So just think about kind of like this graph. Just think about if when you have kind of like if you start with people in the way they can interact, the more people you add to an organization, the more interactions you have, and the more difficult it becomes to communicate with those people, right? And for this, at a certain point, it's just there's so many people that you just can't remember any person, and you can't speak to the people personally anymore. So what you have is what we call this Dunbar's number. At a certain point, you have to implement certain processes in order for the organization to work. So that means the bigger the organization, the more processes, the more difficult it becomes really to manage those processes and apply artificial intelligence in your processes to really streamline your operations. And I mean, this is basically the takeaway. Everyone knows that startups are more agile because they have less processes. It's easier for them to manage the process, and therefore it's also easier for them to implement new solutions into their processes. I mean, I know what I'm talking about because I own a startup, and for us it's very easy to implement a new tool. It takes, I don't know, I just speak with the person and say, well, I want to implement this new tool, and the next day we can try it out. If I want to do the same with a BMW or so on, this same process takes months. And I have kind of like, I have to onboard, I don't know how many people. So it is just much more difficult. And I mean, the last point that I really want to make is when we try to work together with startups, and why this is actually beneficial and helps also the big companies. And I've been working a long time at Applied.AI, and here is what we're doing is actually to work with big companies and see where they are and help them in their AI journey to progress. So what is the AI journey? So we think about it of different maturity levels from, on the one hand side, not having started, to on the other side, really being transformational, where artificial intelligence is really part of your DNA, and you really kind of like rock the game and are almost towards zero operational cost. I mean, not all the companies are getting to this level, and not all the companies are there, but now we have, thanks to ChatGPT, many organizations being in level 1 or level 2 and starting to think about, okay, what can I do with AI? How can I optimize my processes? And one of the classical approaches is what a lot of people think, well, what you have to do if you want to apply AI, you need to hire a team of data scientists, or you have to start to develop those things in-house. I mean, for most organizations, this is not feasible. And I don't think that's the way to go forward. Just think about it. Just think about the advent of computers. So when the first computers arrived, if you wanted to use a computer for your operations, you had to have a team of specialists, you had to have a room, and you have to manufacture a computer for your own needs. I mean, nowadays, my parents are dentists. They're using a computer. They don't even know how to put together a computer. And I think the same will be true for a lot of organizations that we're seeing. They are not there. They don't want to build their own AI, but they want to use the AI that's out there. And there is a lot of good artificial intelligence know-how and knowledge out there that is just open to use. And I mean, most of them is actually coming, or a lot of them is actually coming from the startup world. And I think there are different kind of like what we talk about, this ecosystem approach, and there are different partnerships we can think about and are very good. And for innovation and talent to get new ideas, I mean, there's so much out there to work with different startups, but also with other ecosystem partners that will really help you to accelerate your AI journey, especially at the beginning, especially if you don't know where to start. Just think about it. Just ChatGPT. I mean, normally when I come in with a startup, I'm trying to sell, I don't know how much productivity increase, only to get kind of like my foot into the door of a big company. But just think about a technology just as ChatGPT that improves kind of like your productivity sometimes by a factor of 1.5 or 2. And how kind of like easy it is to apply it. I mean, you don't need long processes. So why don't you work with startups that have a existing solution? And there are so many solutions out there, and every day they're getting more and more and more, rather than to develop your own in-house solution. Especially, I think, at the beginning, this is the way to go forward. This is the way to learn a lot about it. This is the way of really fast getting innovation and getting your first experience with artificial intelligence. And I mean, there are different levels of how you can collaborate with AI startups or other institutions. If you take this ecosystem approach, some of them are much more transactional, especially if you're just going for an off-the-shelf solution, a ready product. But some of them are much more kind of like strategic and much more disruptive. For example, you're an SAP and want to invest in an Aleph Alpha. This is much more of a strategic investment. But I think it's very important to understand if you are somewhere in your AI journey, right, that it's so important, doesn't matter where you are, to have these kind of partnerships, to really get this, whatever you're looking for, ready off-the-shelf solutions, to get know-how, to get innovation, to get talent. And therefore, I mean, I think it's paramount to understand how working with AI startups really can enrich your AI journey and help you to get access to talent, to expertise, and really to really cool new products where you don't have to put a lot of effort in. So, I mean, these are my 3 takeaways. So first of all, applying AI is challenging. Startups and AI, they are a perfect match. Startups often have a competitive advantage when it comes to applying artificial intelligence because they are very agile, they have very few processes. And I think something that's super important to take away, collaboration is really the success. Don't think your AI journey alone. I think there are a lot of players you can learn from, you can work with, you can partner with, you can buy from. And I think it's important really to map this ecosystem. And I think this is a nice place why we have something like Bitkom, where we can meet a lot of people and see where they're standing and how we can create partnerships. And if you're interested in working with AI startups, I welcome you to approach me. I mean, I'm the AI lead at Campus Founders. We actually have one of our all startups here from one of the batches. And if you're interested how you can collaborate more with AI startups, I'm very happy to connect, to talk to you and what we can do to you and how we can all help each other out. So I think I have a couple of minutes time for questions, but thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very insightful and very informative talk. You indeed have some time for questions, so
maybe I should have talked a bit slower.
It was perfect tempo.
Yeah.
If I look for a startup, do you have a catalog, or do I have to specify in which domain I want to look, IoT or banking, or so? Because I mean,
Yeah.
find a good match.
I mean, there are different ways how to do it, right? So there's something like the German AI startup landscape where you can look for. One tool I recommend for the people, so it's very fun. There is an AI tool out there that uses AI to look for tools that use AI. And guess what it's called? There's an AI for that. And you just can put in, so if you, for example, I don't know, you work in procurement, you go on this website, there's an AI for that.com, and you type in procurement, and you will get, I don't know, 50 examples of where different AI startups, different AI solutions are used in procurement. And some of them are more valid, others are not that valid, and you find kind of like how people have rated them, what they cost per month. And I think this is a very good way to start and to look for them. But this interaction then is very transactional. And sometimes I want to go deeper and also maybe want to collaborate and pilot with startups because there's a lot of know-how I can learn. Because I also at some point need to roll out this product to my employees. And often, I mean, I have seen where big companies try to roll out a new product that used AI and they failed in their communication and the product never got adopted. So I think this is very important kind of like to really get these learnings early on because there's so much stigma around applying AI, especially at the beginning.
Thank you. Any more questions? Doesn't seem so, unfortunately, but I guess you'll still be around and, as you said, here for connection and in order to have a coffee.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.